Hmm. Hello, my name is Chitta. I am one of Bante's students, and we decided to try and help Bante because he doesn't live at a fixed monastery. Wherever he goes, becomes a monastery, and therefore he doesn't have a fixed donation box where people can make offerings. So we've added a link below that you can make a donation to help protect the sasana and help support this wonderful monk. If you feel that way inclined, thank you. Be well.
So, the issue of diet or food keeps coming up in the form of questions raised by students or individuals, especially in the capacity or position of a Buddhist monastic, as a bhikkhu, traveling around the world. It's interesting how during the last few years, being in different countries or regions in the world where one would say it doesn't have, or these places would not have, the reputation of being Buddhist or have a notable Buddhist community here and there. What I've encountered were quite interesting experiences where individuals would come and presume automatically that I am vegetarian, or they're surprised when they offer, would I be, you know, when they would, let's say, it's a restaurant or a place like that, they offer food and the menu is brought in, and I am shown the vegetarian section, or oftentimes it would happen where it's almost the person would be almost apologetic, saying, "Oh, sorry, Bante, they don't have that much of a variety of vegetarian meals." And I would ask them, why are they sorry? Why did they? And then usually they would jump in without even having me, say or give a remark. They would say, "Because you're a vegetarian, right?" And my answer is always no. And then there usually is an immediate reaction. Surprise. "Oh, you're not?" "Yeah, I'm not." So, some time ago, several years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, there was a documentary being, um, I was asked to participate. I can't name names yet because they had me sign a non-disclosure agreement, this and that, until it's put out there, this and that. I said, sure. But before I agreed to the interview, I had to do some checking as to who this director is, and they had a few independent documentaries out, or at least one. But the person who was the liaison, when I asked them again and again as to why they chose, I was still a layman at the time. Right before I became a monk, actually. Um, and they said, "Well, because we really liked your talks you've given, and they were on YouTube, this and that." So somehow they came across those, and they really liked the connections I had been making between trauma therapy and what Buddhism had to say, meditation, this and that. So, and they had, I guess, looked into the dissertation I had done on mindful grounding, for my doctorate. Somehow they found me, basically. So when I went back and forth with them to check as to what would the questions be, because it was going to be a series of questions where the director or someone was going to ask me on camera, and I would answer. So I was made to understand in more ways than one, and in no uncertain um, ways, that it will simply be geared towards trauma and how or what tools would Buddhism have. Lo and behold, the day comes after I agreed to this interview, and I went, and I had worked over 8 hours or 8 or so straight hours working with patients that day. I was working with community health in the capacity of psychotherapist, so it was very, very tough day, one of those tough days, and then I had to drive through LA traffic. It took me really long that day, 2 hours to get back to the other side of Los Angeles. So anyhow, I get there, this place that I told them I would meet them, a temple, and they had been there, and so we went in and I signed that thing, and they start asking me questions. It was the director. I was surprised because the questions that were coming at me were very much like, well, they were very specifically oriented towards veganism. The first question, I think it was, we all know that the Buddha was a vegetarian, so could you tell us about the Buddhist perspective on da-da-da-da-da? And I said, excuse me, who told you that the Buddha was a vegetarian? Well, we've in our encounters, and apparently I was one of the very last individuals to be interviewed for the documentary. And again, I was just being interviewed in the capacity of a lay Buddhist Dhamma teacher. So they had already done interviews with apparently famous Buddhist monastics. From that question or that statement already, I immediately knew it must have been Mahayana or Vajrayana, or at least Mahayana is specifically Chinese. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not true. It's not historical. You haven't studied it, have you? I mean, have you seen it in the text that the Buddha was a vegetarian? Where? And the director was stunned. So that didn't go well from that point on, because I guess the series of questions to follow right after that were all geared towards proving to me that the Buddhist path must be vegetarian or veganism. So therefore my position was put under question by this director, who's, I found out, was a vegan, and was to the point where I had to, he really was at one point or another like very much using certain strategies to corner me in a sense, which I didn't appreciate, because I was there and I had the temple doors open for them, and I came there under different understanding, we weren't, at that point I just asked him, I'm sorry, but when will the questions on trauma be coming up? Because that's what I agreed to, not questions on vegetarianism, veganism, and diet. Because I kept on mentioning how important it is for us to go beyond just the mere diet, because Hitler was a vegetarian. Okay? And immediately he jumped in and said, no, that has been disproven. And I said, I don't know if that's true what you're saying, but from what I had, maybe up until this moment, maybe some things have changed and new evidence came up. But to my understanding, to my knowledge of the situation with Hitler, he was a vegetarian. I mean, what was it? One of his closest individuals, Albert Speer, I think, in his memoirs, he mentions how Hitler used to sit during their intimate dinners, basically, him and the closest, like the top echelon of Nazis, them and their families, and he, as the Führer, would sit with them, have dinner, he would eat vegetarian, and I don't know what they would eat, but he would go on talking about how cruel people are towards animals. Animal cruelty. He was talking about how terrible it is, the way that people treat animals and slaughtering them, this and that. This is who's saying this? Hitler. So I didn't get into that much detail, but the reason why I brought that up, the whole thing about the interview, is because this has been increasingly being shoved down people's minds and throats, this veganism business. Okay? And it's part of the agenda. It's part of the propaganda that's been going on. Now, mind you, I was a staunch vegetarian for 10 years. Okay? I remember my dad used to argue with me this and that when he was alive, and he would say, we always had meat in our house, my dad, my grandfather, he would say this, my dad, he would say, would make sure that we had meat in the house because you need it, this and that. And I said, Dad, please, this isn't my thing. I'm doing this because I have decided to not eat meat. Now, one other thing that I had made sure that I was going to abide by, to myself, this was a commitment I made to myself, that the moment I detect in my mind, in my attitude, any derogatory, any condescending, any critical position holding from my part towards others meaning those who are not vegetarian, this is when veganism was not even around. At least it was not, en masse in public being pushed into people's heads and minds and mouths. If I were to detect in myself conceit, arrogance, and judgmentalism towards people who are not following my diet, I would immediately stop. Stop that lifestyle. And the day came where, because I noticed that in my close friends who had been vegetarian long before I had, for over like almost 2 decades they had been, from the 70s. Now, when I detected that, I said, okay. So there's a term, we need to be non-attached. Non-attached. To whatever it is that we are holding as valuable, because ultimately, if it causes pain and suffering, then the whole thing is a sham. This is one of the best litmus tests you could ever use in your life, in anything, including the Dhamma. Because many people use the Buddha's teachings the way they see fit, to match their choices, to match like that person, that director who had convinced himself. Because Buddhism came to fit his narrative, his choices in life, his worldview. Okay, he looked around and the best thing, and look at the videos, the movies, so he's nice, he's very, non-violence, this and that. And so Buddhism is the thing. Obviously, the Buddha was not, because, the 5 precepts that we have, the first of which is not to kill. This is a question that would come up from people for years. And I get that sometimes in letters, sometimes from individuals who are struggling with understanding what position to hold. Well, the position you're holding, if it's causing you harm, suffering, don't hold it anymore. Because it's going against the Dhamma, the teachings of Lord Buddha. Because you're missing the point when you're making diet into such a integral, such a principle, such a central part of your life. Diet will never, never remove your ignorance. It will never remove your kileshas from your heart. Do not fool yourself into thinking that it will somehow. It's not. So what I am also saying here is that people have this presumption that when you become a vegetarian, when you become a vegan, automatically you're on a slightly higher, if not greatly higher position, stratosphere compared to others, spiritually speaking. Meaning you're more spiritually evolved. Nothing could be further from the truth. Veganism does not equal spirituality or evolved, being an evolved, spiritually awakened person. I have encountered many vegans who are drug addicts. I have worked with many vegans who are sex addicts. I have met many vegans who are chain smokers, nicotine. I have met vegans who also go and do yoga and all that, By the way, again, I have to say this. I have been a certified yoga instructor since the 90s. Okay? Back in the day when yoga was not as popular as it became. So I know the value of yoga, hatha yoga, whether it's Ashtanga, Iyengar, Vini, etc., etc., Desikachars, all these. That's not the question. The thing is, the person who's practicing is practicing, but without the information necessary to bring in sila. So veganism does not guarantee your sila. Sila, for those who don't know, it's virtuous living. So when a person is a vegan or a vegetarian, or a carnivore, person who practices carnivore diet, so they're not immune, by the way. The thing that I'm driving at is the importance of looking beyond your plate and the choice of food you're having. That's why the diet, so-called diet of a bhikkhu, is the most perfect. How so? Because Lord Buddha saw that when a bhikkhu, when a monastic is offered food, especially to a true practitioner, a true bhikkhu, someone who's not living double lives, someone who's not a hypocrite, someone who is truly living the holy life, practicing according to the training, then to give a glass of water, a mango, a piece of bread, a piece of meat even, food basically, edible food, to such a person brings tremendous merits and rewards to the person. Okay? This is one thing. The other thing is to have the person experience such tremendous joy, which is immediate. It takes place immediately. That you don't need to spend time waiting for to happen. Okay? Many people think, I've seen them in Asia, they say, Bhante, I'm not interested in the rewards. I say that's noble of you. However, there are these laws that whether you don't care for them or do care for them, they will take place. So as a bhikkhu, we are to accept to give the opportunity for a donor, someone who's offering. So I cannot avoid taking something that is edible, something that is nourishing from someone. I cannot take that opportunity if I am truly practicing the path of Lord Buddha. because I need to make that person gain as much opportunities as possible. Typically, what would happen is we would also, after a meal, for example, a lunch dana, when it's offered, we share Dhamma. Someone asks a question, or a question might have come up earlier before lunch. After lunch, the bhikkhu would give a sermon, a discourse. That's how we have this vast, thousands and thousands of suttas. Many people don't realize that they were the second phase of the lunch dana. And many of these lunches had meat in them. Perfect example is when you go into the earliest suttas from the Sutta Nipata. You encounter so many suttas on this because people were surprised. They would look at Lord Buddha and they would say, well, how could you be a samana, a recluse, and you're eating, in those days even, the rice that was brought in, fine rice, from the king's court? Or you're eating chicken or different animal. There's a few suttas which I translated, and when I finished the Sutta Nipata, there's so many suttas there that Lord Buddha is completely pulling the rug from under all these erroneous assumptions that people have. Interestingly enough, 26 centuries later, we're still dealing with that. Why though? Because the propaganda is so intense on this veganism business. Recently, they had the Burning Man in America, in California. It's one of the most debauchery-laden, orgy, drugs, the worst of the worst you can imagine. Plus the music, this and that. So there is, it's like hedonism to the next level. Many of these individuals, well, at least some of them that I knew over the years, are vegans. So what I'm trying to say is, veganism itself, is it bad? I cannot say yes or no, because every day there's new research on the healthy benefits of on the brain. Because someone recently mentioned how there's new articles coming out, new journals where they're talking about, I think every 10 years you lose a certain percentage of your brain mass. They've done tests on vegans that have been vegans for some time, and they have been following to see what are the benefits or detrimental factors. So anything that we hold on to, grab onto, it's upadana. So as for, are there restrictions for bhikkhus? Because I need to focus more on that. By the way, I have been a teacher in high school, junior high and high school I used to teach AP biology. So meaning that I used to teach biology and nutrition. Also, I'm certified in the past when I was a trainer as a fitness instructor. So I had to do my due diligence to see what is what. So whenever you are going to an extreme, watch out. And remember, this is the middle path. Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path is the middle path. So watch out when you are leaning towards judgmentalism, or when you find yourself wanting others to be like you. This is something that I've seen again and again in vegans, in vegetarians, because I saw it in myself. This is terrible. This is what you see in cults, in fanatic groups. By the way, did you know that the Nazi political party also had a division for animal rights protection? The Nazis, imagine, just try to make room in your brain for this. The Nazis were dedicated to protecting animals while murdering, killing, fumigating to death in the gas chambers, concentration camps, people, millions of people. Look at the hypocrisy, look at the stupidity. This is what I also am cognizant of. And, also there's this, New World Order agenda that's been pushed and pushed and pushed, Agenda 30, it was Agenda 21, and then there's Agenda 2030. They want to reduce the human population of the planet. They actually say that on their website. Okay? World Economic Forum, just go and check it out. It's there. They unabashedly talk about reducing number of people. They Yuval, that their philosopher, in-house philosopher of theirs, who also thinks of himself as a mindfulness practitioner, one of Goenka's offsprings, I guess you could say. He actually, I've heard him say this, that human beings, majority of us, are unnecessary. He promotes basically the destruction, the elimination of majority of us. And he's not alone, of course. I mean, this is not something, some conspiracy theory. No, this is a fact. You go, it's there now. They're not shying away from really putting it out there. So one of those things is selling these, what was it, impossible meat or almost meat or something like. You don't know what they're made of. They're also pushing for the bugs. Bugs. For people to eat. You had, I remember a few years, or last year, famous people were, they had made commercials with famous actors and things promoting how wonderful it is to eat bugs. What's going on? See, I love to look at patterns. I don't look only for the things that happened. This small item, these are not just independently occurring events. There's no such thing. They're planning things, okay? So one of the ways that they're affecting the population, and also, yes, there are detrimental factors. When you're a vegan 100% and you're staunchly there, you will not have a 100% healthy body as you would when you also diversify. Veganism is unnatural. Okay? Nowhere in our human history, in our evolution, do you find any culture, to my knowledge, any culture that would say yes to this and no to that. Usually people are going to think, well, what about Hinduism? Hinduism, well, hold on. Hinduism, when I was actually a few years ago, it was in Nepal, Kathmandu. And the person who was driving me around, he showed me this palace where the former king used to live, who happens to be Hindu. And he said, oh, every year there would be, I think, 1,008 or 108 bulls that they would sacrifice. Kill. Okay? So there's so many stories on this. So there's a lot of data that many people just cover up, don't want to look at even, in order for them to promote what this socially run agenda is. It's a propaganda. And this goes far beyond the diet issue. This goes into being pushed into making others look and behave and do what you have come to agree and dedicate yourself to be doing. So you want the other person to engage in the same lifestyle choices as you. This is sickness. This does not have intelligence or wisdom behind it. Basically, you're saying, just like, with these last 3 years or so, if somebody didn't do something, let's say, whether it was, following the new mandate of this and that, then, families broke apart. Friends ended their friendships because Oh, you're not doing it like it says over here. Yeah, but you're not even seeing me. It's not even logical. It's not even scientific what they're saying. So what's happening here? But the people didn't care because the majority was following along beautifully, obediently, the agendas that were being pushed on them. While you have a minority that is saying, wait a minute, hold on, let's ask questions about this. So the moment you ask questions, you immediately are placed in a box. So this is what I notice a lot of times when people say, well, wait a minute, you're not a vegan, you're not a vegetarian because you're a Buddhist monk. That man was surprised when I told him that Buddha ate meat. And then they bring this other argument. Well, if you're then taking the first precept, which is not to kill, not to harm, so basically you're promoting. So if you say that you don't kill, you don't harm, then you should also not be open to someone offering you meat. Okay? Well, there's a problem with that, again, because remember what I said about lay people offering? There was the Buddha's cousin through marriage, Devadatta, the nemesis. You see him a few times throughout the suttas, who tried to kill the Buddha at least 3 times. Before he tried that, actually, he tried to, replace Lord Buddha. But he was very sneaky. One of the things that he did was he made a chart. He made like a list of things. He went to the Buddha and said, one of the things was, bhikkhus should be vegetarian. And in those days, there was no vegan, so you can't eat meat. Can't. Lord Buddha there reads listens to him, his proposal, and he says, I'm not against these. If the person wants to, the monk, there were other things like never reside in a monastery and always be living outside and, never going to people's houses when they're invited to go eat. You can only eat when you're walking and through pindapada, this and that, and you should never eat meat. He says, what about when someone offers you fish? And the person only has fish. He's a fisherman. What do you do? Now you can add cheese to that. Or butter. Or this and that. Meanwhile, your bodies, your joints are crying out for help, and you're saying, no, I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to take that vitamin. I'm going to bend over backwards to try to find an alternative way of doing this. Meanwhile, your knees are crying, There's no intelligence, there's no wisdom there. So Lord Buddha said, if a bhikkhu wants that, they could do it, but we cannot impose these. Now, some of the traditions over time, especially when the Chinese Mahayana tradition came in to the West, a portion of the Mahayana, the Chinese tradition, had adopted the vegetarian diet. And for that, they were suffering tremendously, by the way, physically. But they made it to the West with the Chinese immigrants. So, at that point, if you were a Buddhist, there was an equal sign, which meant, especially if you're a monastic, to you being also a vegetarian. That has stayed in the psyche of the Western public. Even if you go to somewhere like Hungary, where I was a few months ago, people who are traditionally Christian, somehow in their, psyche or subconscious, they presumed that I cannot eat meat. So they were dabbling to try to find what could they serve me. And I said, relax. What do you have over there? Okay, I'll take that. Now, one of the rebuttals that that person who was interviewing me, I don't call it an interview because it turned into, I think, something like shooting, I was like dodging all these things. Anyhow, I said, hold on. And I've said this to others over time. as a bhikkhu, we can, if we suspect that the animal was killed for us, we can't eat it, we can't touch it. We respectfully avoid it and get out of there. Okay? If we hear the animal being killed, we cannot touch it, we cannot eat it, we cannot condone it, we walk away. We'll be hungry that day. If that's the case, we won't touch it. If we see the blood of the animal at any point, we walk away. We cannot. If we suspect, even suspect remotely that this possibly might have been the animal was killed for me, I can't eat it. So there are precautions. Now, on top of that, because people might presume that, oh, okay, so if you're eating meat, then you should, what if there's no meat and you're like starving, let's say. I would tell them there's no period at the end, like there's no there's no like a comma for me to continue after that. If there's no food, vegetables, legumes, or things that are going to help me to survive the day, and there's a chicken walking around, or there's an iguana, or a cat, or a dog, or a sheep, or a cow, or something, guess what? They're going to live comfortably, watching me die. That means, as a bhikkhu, it's impossible for me to lay a finger or even entertain the thought that, that chicken would have been excellent as a drumstick. No. Because that would also mean I'm breaking a precept, even in my mind, to entertain such a thought. So the holier than thou nonsense that I'm noticing a lot of people. Today it's veganism, yesterday it was vegetarianism, tomorrow it might be something else. Okay, so this is not I'm not attacking anyone. It's the ignorance that I am addressing, that I notice coming up again and again and again. Now, of course, even if it's because the question might come up like, can you refuse a meal if it didn't meet any of those criteria? Still, would you refuse it? Well, yeah. Let's say if you're full, you put your hand on the bowl or in the plate and say, no, thank you, I'm done. Or if you smell something horrible, if it's a foul food, rotten food, no. Lord Buddha was very down to earth. He was a reasonable, rational human being. No, you don't have to. Maybe the person could give you a glass of water instead. That's fine. Or they can allow you to live in their, courtyard for the night. Or they have an extra room somewhere outside in the shed. You can go and if it's, they could offer you something else. Or they could give you a ride, for example. But as far as us promoting as a bhikkhu or even as lay people, meat eating, so therefore we have to go and kill. No, you're eating ready-made meat. There was one sutta which I recently translated, and in it, it was actually on from the Anguttara Nikaya. It's up. I narrated it as well. It's on YouTube now. General Siha from the Anguttara Nikaya, I forgot, Book of the Eights, I think it was Sutta number 34, 35 or 6, I'm not sure. Anyhow, in it he was he belonged to a different sect called Jainism. Jains also presume that they are, they're the ones that, Gandhi followed their system basically. Ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence, but non-violence, it's a term that is very deceptive. For example, one of their rules is you cannot, if you're burning hot from fever, Okay, in those days, if you get yourself a cold cup of water, and you need cold cup of water, you're not allowed to drink it. Imagine somebody burning with fever. And this is an example that Lord Buddha uses as well in a sutta called Upali Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya. And but what they do is they allow you to go ahead and boil. But by the way, why do you not drink the cold water? The cold water, because they believe that there are tiny little microorganisms there. If you drink them, you're going to kill them. They were the first mask wearers, by the way. Okay? Because they believe that there's tiny little organisms that when you're breathing directly through into your nostrils, you're killing them. So they would wear these, they won't walk on grass even today. All this irrational, I would say. Because humanity is being sacrificed. I've seen people not do, let's say, walking on the grass. They become like chained up. There's no metta there, there's no loving kindness. It's just like, I cannot do this because of this. Meanwhile, they might be sacrificing another being. The death of somebody else is possible there because they're not rushing fast enough, because it's a shortcut. You can just take a few steps over the grass and get there and help that person who's dying of something. So they'd rather stand here on this side because they're surrounded by grass. It's so foolish. So anyhow, the example that Lord Buddha gives is, in Jainism, the cup of cold water is not allowed to be drunk, but you can go ahead and boil the water and then drink it. Now, anyone with 2-digit IQ knows what that means. Because now, if the animal didn't die in cold water, you definitely killed it because you boiled it. So you see how nonsensical it is. So in the other sutta that I was mentioning, the General Siha Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Eights, General Siha goes to listen to Lord Buddha and sees how rational, how wise, and how beautiful the Dhamma is, to the point where he becomes a Sotapanna. He becomes a first stage awakened one. And then he says, Bhante, tomorrow's meal, you're invited, you and the Sangha. So Lord Buddha accepts in silence, and then the next day they're going to be there. So meanwhile he goes to his mansion. He's a general, He tells his servants, go to the market and find, all this stuff, for food. By the way, also get some meat that is already available and is being sold. Guess what the Jains do? Immediately they found out that they lost him because he was a big, big, big benefactor to them. So they lost him to Buddhism. They start these rumors, not rumors, they go almost like protesting with arms and, up in the air, saying, oh, the General Siha now has started killing animals. He was a Jain, we don't kill animals, and look at him, he's killing animals, and he's feeding them to his new teacher. And the Buddha knowingly is eating the meat that was killed for him. This was happening 2,600 years ago. We still have this. So what I'm trying to say is, with all these words, we have to look at the agendas people have. There's a lot of inadequacy. There's a lot of being less than. So this is the opposite side of conceit, where you are better than me or something that makes me uneasy with what I'm seeing. So I have to make you equal to me, which is the second form of conceit. The third one is, I already mentioned, where I am better than you, which comes in right after, because they're all conceit. So it's all conceit. If I am comfortable with whatever diet I'm following, so long as I'm not killing any animal, any harming any animals, that's fine. Who cares what you're eating over there? You might be eating red meat, but are you killing it? Are you going after the animal? And what if there's no red meat tomorrow? Are you going to lose it? Are you going to start going after the cats in the neighborhood? As Buddhists, We cannot go after those animals, killing them because they're no longer there. And I have to have my meat, I have to have my chicken. No, that's unacceptable. But when it is there, so there's the argument that people come back with, that's a totally useless or futile argument because it puts us in a circle. Ultimately, is there suffering being reduced? Because the diet will not create an arahant. Okay? It's impossible for anyone's diet. Look at Hitler. Okay? Make him into your role model of what not to become. Because that's what I notice people are becoming. So, wisdom. This path is based on wisdom, not diet. Okay. And another thing that people have to recognize is it really doesn't matter what diet you're, not as long as we're not talking about cannibalism, because that is something that has come to my attention as far as places. It's deplorable. It's disgusting that in some modern, so-called modern countries, including Los Angeles, there are restaurants that are not listed somewhere, but their phone numbers are available apparently, that serve human flesh. Human flesh. What have we come to? Even animals don't do that. Animals don't do that. You will never see a lion eating another lion. They won't. So, beyond the title of the diet, whatever it is, it can be a wonderful tool. If you're a vegetarian, for example, I know when I was a vegetarian, I know it so much enhanced my willpower against my baser or lesser tendencies. It gave me such tremendous willpower, determination to do other things as well that would not have come easily. Because, there were certain types of dishes that my mom used to like to make, or my dad enjoyed, and that was also my favorite, let's say, and it would be done, and I wouldn't touch it. So I would watch them eat, and I will abstain. That's what my position was. And then I had to also listen to my dad, for example, telling me, barraging me, chastising me with words that I'm doing something wrong, and still keep a straight face and smile and be kind and compassionate. So all these things were chiseling my character. So yes, it could be a wonderful tool, so one should not throw the baby with the bathwater again. Same thing with veganism. The person's health might not allow them to eat something else, for example. Or it might be just complete choice. Fine. Let the person be like that. But also the vegan should not go ahead and expect others to be doing that because of, I always tell people, get off your high horse. I had people who would come and say, well, I don't eat any animals that don't have eyes, any beings that don't have eyes. Therefore, I'm a vegetarian or I'm a vegan. What kind of a nonsense is that? Have you ever seen a human cell or an animal cell under a microscope and then compare that to a plant cell? The plant cell, obviously, will be full of chlorophyll, let's say, which is the green pigment, chloroplast. You will have the cell walls, yes, so it would be more rectangular or squarish in shape compared to a human cell. But there's the same amount of action going on inside the plant cell. One of the things that you need, well, a few of the things that you need to call a being, a living thing, an organism, is they need to respond to stimulus. Some type of stimuli that happen, they will have a response to that. That makes a person, the thing being discussed, a living organism. Well, guess what plants have? The same thing. They respond. You think you're the only one who has skin? Plants have skin too. They respond to situations, circumstances. They feel stress. They feel. Several universities, even recently, I think one was in Melbourne or somewhere in Australia and other places, they're making, doing research and finding out that, wait a minute, plants are not, what we thought they were. Basically just consumable things. So I'm saying this in response to individuals who still think that, oh, plants don't have, what animals do, so basically they're permissible. Another thing that most people don't consider is the amount of animals that have to be sacrificed or pushed out of their ancestral homes to make room for this single mono crop that this farmer is now having to plant, sow, and harvest so he can make some money. Whether it's almonds, whether it's corn, whether it's soy, whatever. That's producing that tofu, that produces that thing that you eat, the mock duck or whatever it is, the fake meat. Meanwhile, you're believing that you're doing something wonderful, but you don't look further back than the supermarket counter from where you're buying this item that you so adore. And feeling good as you walk away without any regret or remorse. But hold on, let's rewind the tape further back. Before it got to the shelf at your favorite supermarket, before it got to the truck, before it got boxed in something, while it's in that field, are they spraying the field with something to make sure that your beans or this or that are safe? The carrots, the vegetables, this, that you are eating, they're not going to be devoured by some, critter, some animal coming in and eating it? How about those deers, the other animals, the four-legged animals that try to jump the fence that they've constructed, the electrocuting fences that I've seen personally in Australia? It zaps them. And what if you're not a big animal? You're not a cow. You're not a big elk. What if you're a smaller animal? Well, guess what? They were electrocuted right there on the spot. And you know what the farmer does? And you're never going to see a picture of this or a video of this. They just toss it into the trash, along with all the other lizards, animals, birds, rodents, snakes that used to call that home before they made it available for your favorite food that you eat with quote-unquote a clear conscience. So in essence, you basically were responsible for the deaths of many more animals than just one particular animal that this person that you're pointing the finger and saying, oh, you're a carnivore. That person might have just eaten one single chicken. Meanwhile, you were responsible for the deaths of so many. So there could be that argument as well. So in here, I'm not trying to defend one or prosecute or blame someone. What I'm trying to say is we need a bigger perspective before we point any fingers. Remember why you chose to be a vegan, why you chose to be a carnivore, why you chose to be a vegetarian. Why? That has to be a compelling enough reason for you to work on yourself. So this should be an educational system for you. That's where Dhamma could come in and help. But please do not rely on your choice of diet to make you more spiritual, to make you more of a responsible human being. That is rubbish. That is nonsense. One word, Hitler. Okay? And these past 3 years, I've seen a lot of Hitlers in my life. Everybody coming and pointing the finger and saying, oh, why aren't you doing this? You should do this. You're not following along. Da, 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 da. Many, many Hitlers, many Nazis. You think they lost the war? Think again. The whole propaganda is the same thing. It's continuation of 1945. 1939, actually. But we need to be smarter and wiser, and whatever choices you made with your diet, fine. But make sure you're not killing it. You're not aware, because that's the question that comes up sometimes to me personally as a bhikkhu, and as what would be a good practice for a Buddhist practitioner as far as lifestyle. Of course, butchering and killing animals is not acceptable as a good or healthy or right livelihood for a layman and for a bhikkhu as well, of course. And we cannot eat anything. I once was invited somewhere, and I was a layman at the time, and 2 of my students had invited me over to eat food. And they said, we're going to bring fish. And I had known in the past that they would tell me that they like to go fishing. So I paused and I said, well, I can't eat if you have caught the fish with me in mind, like you got it. And he laughed and said, no, it's just in the fridge, in the freezer, where we're just going to. He looked at me funny, like, oh, why would I not be able to eat, type of a thing. And I explained to him, and they were very respectful. They were not Buddhist students. They were students from when I used to teach high school. So years later, when anyhow they saw me, so they invited me for lunch. But I was a layman. I told them, and they invited me, but I made it clear that I need to know, is this being killed for me? And they said no. So I was able to go. So please don't use that lame argument that, okay, so, because there's no way that you will be able to stop the killing of animals, okay? That is too utopian, too Disney-esque way of thinking. Even snobbish. There's no such thing. It's like that person, John Usoni, he came to Lord Buddha one time. It's also drenched in naivete, simple-mindedness, to say, well, if you don't ask for meat, they're not going to kill animals. Well, try to see what happens. A few months ago, I was in Scotland. From what I spoke to tour guides and all these people, and they didn't walk around with guns over their shoulders, rifles, waiting to kill animals. No. They love nature, they love their country, they love the beauty of Scotland, understandably so. But one of them said, oh, we have to make sure that the deer population doesn't go, it's already out of control. And I said, why? He said, because we haven't had any natural predators for the deer and the elk and other animals they have. So they have been destroying property. They're just huge in number. So what the government did was basically they allow places to function as, to have people who want to go and hunt them. I'm not promoting hunting at all. What I'm trying to say is that naive idea that, if you don't ask, the animal is not going to die or something. And my answer to these individuals who would criticize, especially that person that I mentioned to you who was interrogating me, it wasn't an interview, I told him, the difference between you and I is, I think I did tell him, is that if there's no food tomorrow for us, that also includes not just meats gone, but grains and bread and vegetables, edible things, and you have animals running around still. One of us will die, and it won't be you. It will be me. And he's like, why? I said, because unlike you, I will not be able to kill the animal to satisfy my hunger. But you, on the other hand, will go and kill those animals that you are protecting, so-called, now. Because you still have, meatless burgers, you still have impossible meats, you still have this and this and that and this and so many options. But when those things run out, you're going to go after the real deal. And you're going to put this all aside and you're going to justify, just like you've been justifying the inhumanity that's been going on for the last 3 years. Putting your values aside, your sanity aside, decency aside, in the name of, well, yeah, we have to do it because that's what they're telling us. Where's your common sense? Where's your humanity? But people like titles, so I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, I'm a carnivore. Who cares? How is that changing you? That's what the Dhamma asks. In other words, is suffering in your life becoming less and less, or not? Most of these people that have come to me, I see sadness, anxiety, incredible anxiety, and contempt in their eyes. Contempt. Talking down with conceitedness. Oh, he eats meat over there. Yeah? Well, the Buddha ate meat. No. Yes, the Buddha ate meat. Not only him, all of the bhikkhus did too. And guess what? They were all arahants. Show me one vegan who turned arahant. Okay? So please don't attach yourself to the labels. This is, again, not to put down veganism, vegetarianism, carnivorism, whatever ism it is. Eat the thing that's sustaining you. Eat well. Make sure you're getting enough nourishment, because the thing that you need to be worried and concerned about is what are they putting in the food we're eating. Okay? A few weeks ago, I was flying over Europe within a span of 3 hours in the central part of Europe. As I was sitting on the right side of the plane, it was a window seat. I counted at least 10 huge jumbo jet-sized planes pass by. Two of them passed right underneath us. I don't know. It was much less than 1,000 feet, I can tell you that, because I've flown a plane before. It was less than 1,000 feet difference. And it was flying, it whizzed by. And guess why I'm mentioning this? Because all of these, at least 10, at the very least, it's a conservative number, within 3 hours span, and this was only one side of the plane I'm mentioning, they were fumigating the air. So anybody who doesn't believe in chemtrails, go fly a little bit on top of Europe somewhere. And guess what? A few of them went, and the plane went through the chemtrail of other planes that I didn't see, but you could see the trail. As the plane went through it, there was a slight bump. So this was not water vapor. Okay? I've done chemistry. These were heavy metals. There was a slight bump, and it didn't happen once. I wanted to make sure I'm not making quick, conclusions here. And something even worse happened. Suddenly, out of the norm, the whole plane started coughing as we went through it, because to my knowledge, the cabin pressure is at elevation of 8,000 feet. Okay? But where is the air coming from? It doesn't just circulate, it takes some of it from the outside also. But we were flying through it. I also felt the cough. And I wasn't coughing as much, but I was resisting the cough. And it started burning. Now, at least 10 huge jumbo jet-sized planes that were fumigating. This was not, the exhaust. Okay? It would be dumb, imbecile, too stupid for a person to presume that chemtrails don't exist, that these are somehow good for us, or you couldn't see the blue sky for, it's all covered. What happened to the blue sky? Because the moment we went above the clouds, at one point, you see the blue, beautiful, beautiful blue sky above. But they are making these clouds, and they're not just water vapor. Where do you think that's going to go? There's this thing called gravity, This is not water vapor. We're inhaling it, and it's going into the food. The food you're eating, I'm eating. You can protect yourself to some degree, but my concern is the protection of the mind, the heart. That is primary. So please stop with these actually plural arguments of veganism, that-ism. Who cares ultimately? So long as you're not breaking any sila, and you're working on your mind and your attitude and your conceit. Because so long as you're not an arhat, you're very much conceited. So it used to be political views, now it is dietary views. Us versus them. It's the same thing. Remember, Hitler sitting on the dinner table complaining how animals are being brutally treated, inhumanely. Meanwhile, he's sending millions of people to the gas chambers, torturing people to death, starving people to death. The diet is not going to create an arhat. Okay? So stop with the nonsense. And get on with your life with a happy smile and a clean heart, clean mind.